Hi everyone and welcome back to Stephan Livera podcast. Today we're going to be talking about RGB and some of the new stuff happening there. So rejoining me on the show is Anant. Listeners, you might know him from Keeper, but this time he's also joining to talk from a Bitcoin Tribe product lead perspective. And of course, long-time listeners, you know Federico as well. Federico is head of R&D over at Bitfinex and of course very involved in what's going on with RGB. So yeah, guys, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Stephan.
Yeah, so I guess what spurred this was, as I know, there's been some updates in the world of RGB, and I guess super quick overview for people who aren't really familiar. RGB is this way of doing, let's say, smart contracting in Bitcoin, but it's not like, a side chain it's kind of like on top of Bitcoin. We're going to get into kind of the detail a little bit of how that works. And the other way I'm understanding it is you can do assets on top of RGB. So right in kind of crypto and shitcoin land, it's really popular now to talk about RWA, real world assets. And so I guess this is kind of one way to do that in Bitcoin. And of course, the other big news is Tether. And I guess Federico can obviously touch on this, working with Bitfinex Tether on Tether coming to RGB. So I guess that's kind of, in my mind, that's a bit of the overview. But can you guys give us your take on this in terms of the new updates with RGB?
Yeah, maybe should I go first or like?
Yeah, go on, Federico.
Go on.
Yeah, so RGB in few words is like this protocol for tokenization on top of Bitcoin that has also a little bit of smart contract capabilities. But being on top of Bitcoin and on top of Bitcoin, we mean like really on top of Bitcoin, not with some like side chain or like a federation or some like something that introduce trust trade-offs. So directly on top of Bitcoin, and is also compatible with any Bitcoin scalability solution, such as nowadays Lightning Network is the only one that is truly working in production. So RGB is compatible with the Lightning Network, but is in principle compatible also with other scalability solutions such as Arc or State Chain or anything that may come in the future. So it's a way to have asset tokenization on top of Bitcoin, and then later on we can also look at the use cases and what we are excited about regarding this.
Yeah, and Anant, an update on your side.
So you see RGB, and the reason we've been like focusing really hard on RGB is because, like Federico said, RGB is essentially the sats that we use to transition Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain. We have these UTXOs, which are nothing but the envelopes that carry sats, right? In normal terms, that is what I tell when a new team member joins us how I explain RGB, and we are using these envelopes for additional purposes. So basically, RGB is doing more with Bitcoin without changing anything on Bitcoin, right? So everything lives off chain. The issuance, the transfers, the validation, everything lives off chain. But essentially, at the end of it, you write a hash on that particular envelope and like send it across. So that is essentially what RGB is. We have RGB has gone live on mainnet. That is the big update, and that is one of the reasons we have been talking about it. Like you mentioned, USDT has reaffirmed their commitment towards RGB. We have done a small pilot with a test token called TUSDT, which went very well, which is like on the mainnet. So that was tested, by a lot of people across the world. So yeah, that is basically, and a lot of new products and features are like coming up in the ecosystem, in the RGB landscape. So that's essentially a brief update for you.
Yeah. Okay. And look, I guess obvious question that most people will want to ask. They'll be like, why aren't we all Bitcoin maxis? Why do we even need non-Bitcoin assets? How would you guys answer that question?
I think there are two answers. One is that there are some people that are also interested in other assets, but they still want to leverage the all the guarantees that Bitcoin has to offer in terms of security, but also scalability thanks to Lightning Network and other scalability solutions. Also, personally, the use case I'm most excited about is the stablecoin use case with USDT. And in the end, Bitcoin is the biggest asset in the crypto industry. But still, people that want to trade Bitcoin against USDT in a DEX setup, they end up using like a wrap Bitcoin, like a centralized version of Bitcoin that it's really not ideal. I mean, like nobody want to, if people could avoid it, they would like to avoid it. So there have been all this attempt to bring Bitcoin to other chain with this centralized wrap Bitcoin, but it's much easier to bring, it makes much more sense to bring USDT to Bitcoin because USDT is anyway already a centralized asset with a centralized issuer. So then people can trade USDT directly against native Bitcoin, or potentially also other asset against Bitcoin, but against real Bitcoin, not against some wrapped version of Bitcoin.
I see. And so as I'm understanding in like crypto land, I'm not as familiar with that land. I mean, maybe you guys are a little more closer to that, or at least understanding what they're doing there. But they've got things like they might have some staking pool thing or something where they want to put some asset in and borrow against that and get stablecoin against that. And for that reason, that's why, like you said, they might be using wrapped Bitcoin or something like this now. And potentially, yes, we are seeing some of this kind of thing in, Bitcoin land as well, like Bitcoin collateralized lending startups as an example. And I guess some forms of asset trading inside of, Bitcoin land. But I guess the idea is RGB is going to allow more forms of that to happen in Bitcoin as opposed to people having to go into altcoin ecosystems for those things.
I mean, like also Bitcoin as a most Bitcoin maximalists in the end, they still may need to manage their exposure with the US dollar to some degree. So yeah, we all want to be 99%. First of all, not everyone is so aggressive to be 99% allocated, but even if you want to be 99% allocated to Bitcoin, you still have that 1% that you need to manage a bit. Either you do it through either you do it directly to cash, which is, but yeah, it's not always the best way. Not for everyone is the best way. Or you do it through like a KYC exchange. Or if you want to do it like in a decentralized manner, yeah, nowadays you need to go to altcoin, to shitcoins that you may not want to touch. You may not even know, you don't want to go through MetaMask and deal with all of the stuff. So if you can have it natively on Bitcoin, it's also great for a Bitcoin maximalist that, knows that the dollar will go to zero eventually, but you still need to have a bit of dollar exposure right now. So it's great tool also for pure Bitcoin maximalist people.
Yeah. And let's just talk through, just because, a lot of listeners may not have played around with RGB themselves. Can you just walk through, what does it actually look like for the end user, right? Like if I'm just an everyday, let's say I'm a Bitcoin guy, but I want some Tether. I want some RGB Tether. What does it look like? Is it just like an app and I send and receive using RGB Tether? Can you just walk me through, just to give listeners a sense of what that looks like?
Yeah, so it's very important to understand that one of the first things is because RGB is built on the Bitcoin blockchain, sats are essentially the fuel for your assets. So anything, it's like if you want to send or receive or issue, you can do all that, but you're using underlying sats for like a gas.
So I have to do an on-chain transfer. Let's say I want to do an on-chain transfer. So let's say I want to receive some RGB Tether from you. Do I show you an address and then you send some Tether to me using RGB and it's an on-chain transfer to achieve that? Or talk me through that.
Pretty much. So basically, once you have some sats, you can do these transactions. But the way these transactions work is as you would do in any other situation. I'll come to the part where we introduce Lightning and we make it more efficient. But if you just consider a normal on-chain one, you show me an invoice, I send RGB on a token on it, an asset on it, and you receive it. That's it. There is a bit of interaction, but that is all handled behind the scene. For a sender and receiver, you show a QR code, I scan the QR, I send it, you receive it. That's it. So it is an on-chain transaction when you are not using Lightning. But when you are using Lightning, let's come to that part. When you are using Lightning, you don't even have to commit it on-chain. You can have that UTX, so the envelope that I was talking about, where you are going to write the asset anchor, you can keep it off-chain all the time unless you actually close the channel or commit it on-chain. So that's how it works.
And so in the RGB Lightning context, then I presume we get similar guarantees like in Lightning. It's instant payment and lower fees. Is that the main kind of thing we're dealing with there when we're talking about RGB Lightning, or what's different?
There's the same trade-off that you have normally with Lightning. The only difference is that the channel is denominated in RGB asset instead of being denominated in Bitcoin. But for UX point of view and security point of view, it's all the same.
Okay, so just to be clear then,
Absolutely.
when we do an RGB Lightning channel, it's asset specific. So let's say it's a Tether RGB Lightning channel. Let's say I open that Lightning channel with you, Federico. Now we can transfer back and forth RGB Tether over that RGB Lightning channel. That's how it would work?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, and then I presume you're going to have some kind of swap provider, or maybe this is where like the Collider swap example is useful, because many everyday users, like the end user, he doesn't really want to do all the channel management or whatever. I presume you're going to have like swaps in the background, so then the end user can just have like a simple app experience, but actually in the background there's swaps going on. Is that roughly what's happening, or can you explain?
Yeah, I mean that also the exact user experience depends also a little bit of the application developers, how they want to offer it to their users. But yeah, having swaps on the fly is definitely an option. Or you can just have like what you have with already a lot of Lightning wallets that they take care of managing your channel liquidity also for USDT or whichever asset you want to use, and have channel denominated like a network of channel denominated in that specific RGB asset. So I mean there are trade-offs involved, rather like if you want to if it's easier to bootstrap enough liquidity for that specific asset, or to have like swaps on the fly. I think for popular asset like USDT, it makes more sense to just have like an entire Lightning network, bootstrap like channel liquidity denominated in that asset. For less popular asset, maybe swaps swaps on the fly is a better solution, but that's something more for app developer than protocol related constraints.
Gotcha. And then speaking of developers, let's hear from your perspective, Anant, because you're building Tribe, a Bitcoin Tribe, which is an RGB wallet. Can you talk us through like your approach there? What has it been like for you building an RGB wallet? And just explain a bit about that for us.
Yeah, sure. So like Federico was explaining, the Lightning network itself has a liquidity of that particular asset, right? So for example, if I'm sending you USDT, I don't actually, and you are okay to receive in USDT, I don't actually need to do a swap, because underlying it's sats, but the sats are carrying the same USDT which you will get, and you're happy to receive USDT. So that's a given. And many of the transfers happen that way. Now, if you want to abstract it further, you can introduce swaps where I'm saying I'm actually going to send you a Swiss franc stablecoin and you want to receive USDT. That is when the swap might come into picture.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or you want to onboard yourself with first like swapping sats for USDT and then using it. Or let's say there are Apple shares on top of RGB, then swap might come into picture where you are swapping USDT for RGB asset, that particular RGB asset, and then you're receiving. So swap may not necessarily come into picture for when you're sending and receiving, if you want the same asset, let's say USDT. But otherwise, swap is a good corollary function to have around in the ecosystem. And that is the way we are approaching it in Tribe. Tribe currently focuses on really developing the core of RGB. So if you use Tribe, you would realize that we have really abstracted the sats concept completely away. So yes, you can see your sats balance, but you do not have to worry about it. And recently we even launched something called a witness script, which what that means is that you can get started with RGB even if you don't have sats. So let's say you have downloaded Tribe wallet and you want to start receiving something. So there is something called witness script where I can send you, let's say $5, and you can receive it without having sats. So we are focusing on those core concepts where a single asset or a single transfer can happen with least amount of friction and with the most effective use of sats. Once that is done, transitioning it to Lightning would be super easy. And if you look at the players in the RGB ecosystem, actually everyone is trying to cover different niches so that you have a holistic solution. And yes, at the end of it, you should just be able to send and receive any asset to anyone, anywhere, basically.
Yeah. And I guess fees are low right now on chain. So I guess for now, people are just going to start on chain because it's cheap, right?
I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely, absolutely.
I think right now, that's same situation that you have with Bitcoin, rather like if you want use Bitcoin on chain or on Lightning. But I think that there are use cases of using RGB on Lightning also, not only because of the fees, but also because of the lower latencies. And that's particularly interesting when you do trading on Lightning. So once you have USDT on Lightning or like any other popular asset, you can do atomic swaps between USDT and Bitcoin, and this can be used, either in the payment use case as we just described, but also for the trading use case, the people that want to trade. And for trading, to have like short-term finality is quite important. I mean, you don't want to do a trade and then it ends there like for 30 minutes because it's waiting for confirmation. So it's not a fee problem, but it's also like a latency on the settlement problem. And there, like Lightning is perfect because you can have like instant finality of the trade. I mean, as instant as Lightning can be of the trade, and you can enable some sort of almost high frequency trading. I mean, high frequency usually is a term used for like nanoseconds, but you can go as low as a millisecond with Lightning if you have a direct channel with the counterparty and there is no problems, or you have very good routing in principle. So
I see. So I guess that's like a business model there for someone that if they want to set up like an RGB exchange where people can trade in and out quickly, that maybe that's like a business model there. And yeah, so maybe if you guys could just talk us through what it looks like when you want to create an RGB asset and transfer that asset and then delete that asset. Like, what does it look like for someone who wants to, make an asset in RGB?
Yeah, so first step really in RGB is obviously to issue an asset. We call it issuing an asset, which is basically creating an asset. And in RGB, it's a peer-to-peer system. Anyone can create an asset. The short form of it is that creating an asset is defining an asset. What is that asset? Putting it in a specific schema that has been defined, and then keeping it off chain and putting the hash of it on, in one of the UTX. So you do not have to disclose anything about the asset, its value, how many they are, none of it. So you have as far as the Bitcoin blockchain goes, it doesn't know anything about the asset. It just knows that a single one-time UTXO has been used for something, which is like a normal transaction. But when I send it to you, Stephan, or any other receiver, that is basically the second step. I send it to you. So when I send it to you, you can. I also have to send you, the details of that asset. So I send you a UTXO on chain, but basically, parallelly, I'll also have to send you what is that asset and every detail about it. Now you can completely verify it off chain, like do all the looking up and verifying. Okay, I was supposed to receive 5 USDT. Is it 5 USDT? And everything is in line or not? You can verify it, and then you can check on chain that okay, what this guy is saying, actually he has committed to it. He actually has 10 USDT and he's sending me 5 of them. So that is how sending, receiving, and verification on the receiver side works. It's actually pretty simple. Just the key point here is, again, that it's completely client side. So I send a particular transaction to your address or your UTXO, and then I send you separately that, by the way, this is the contract whose hash is committed on that UTXO. So that is why, it is a bit more sophisticated on the client side, on the wallet development side, but for the user, it is pretty straightforward.
I see. And then I guess the other interesting thing is that it's more chain efficient in a way, right? Compared to like, kind of shitcoin land, but like BRC20, people were getting really annoyed. And, I viewed that as spam because it was like just spamming the UTXO set. Whereas this is like it's a different kind of asset protocol where, as you said, it's client side validated. It's a different paradigm. So can you explain a little bit, like, what does it look like on chain and, from an asset perspective, what does it look like?
Like the way RGB works is that basically it use off-chain data to give to assign asset to Bitcoin UTXOs. So there is a Bitcoin UTXO, it contains some sats, and we say, okay, now it doesn't only contain sats, but it also contains some assets. And when you want to move that to a new UTXO, you basically create a transaction that is spending that UTXO, so you are proving that you are the legitimate owner of the asset, and then you create a new message that say, okay, these assets that were in UTXO A from now on will be in UTXO B. This message is hashed, to simplify, hashed and committed inside the same transaction. And this is RGB supports two commitment methods. One is through op return, and one is through Taproot commitments. So the trade-off is op return is a bit simpler on the implementation side for wallet developers, and also it doesn't risk overlapping with other meta protocols on top of Taproot that may emerge in the future. While Taproot is even more efficient because the commitment, you don't even have the operator component, it's just inside the Taproot output itself. So from the on-chain perspective, you either have this extra 40 bytes with the operator, or you have this extra 0 bytes with the Taproot commitment. But yeah, it's very compressed, because then this 40 bytes can also be the commitment for several transfers that were going out of that UTXO or that group of UTXO if you are having like multiple inputs.
Oh, that's interesting. So just so I understand you there, you're saying one one on-chain transfer can actually relate to multiple RGB asset transfers.
Yeah.
That's the point you're saying.
I can either pay out hundreds of thousands of people at the same time. That it can be the use case of an exchange operating withdrawals or stuff like that. Or I can even aggregate multiple inputs for cooperating payment protocols, or transfer different assets at the same time. The thing is each transaction will have only one commitment, and then this commitment is actually a Merkle tree that commits to all the different individual RGB transfers that are happening.
I see. Yeah, so it is way more efficient in that way.
It's slightly more efficient for the simple case of one-to-one transfer, but is massively more efficient for transfer that are paying to multiple people and that are more complex.
I see. So I guess as an example then, if you're doing like some kind of RGB DEX or something like this, when you're doing a payout, you could be doing like one on-chain transaction that relates to thousands of payouts, right?
Yeah. So the scalability on the batching side is basically, you have this fixed amount of byte, and then whatever you're doing with the transfer, it can all go there. So the scalability is very, very good.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting just to kind of understand the different paradigms of the efficiency side of it. Now in terms of uses, I think most of our discussion here has been around, let's say, stable coins. I guess you've touched on, in some cases, maybe people want to do tokenized equity or maybe tokenized debt could be examples in the future. So are you seeing this as mainly, at least for now, is it mainly a stablecoin story? Like, is that the main reason you see, or what you're interested in, but maybe other people are interested in other things? Maybe you guys just can comment on that. I guess the question is it mostly a stablecoin story with RGB?
The way I would put it, it's stablecoin is huge. Any digital token asset in the crypto space is basically Bitcoin or essentially stablecoin. So stablecoin is huge, and stablecoin is obviously going to be a big part of what RGB is. But theoretically, or if you take a step back, you could have any real world asset, and stablecoin is a huge example within that, and it's a proven example and ever growing example. So it's like the big thing. But you can have any asset. Within the team, we play around with it. We issue some simple memorabilia and trinkets, and you can pretty much do anything. See, the point is that Bitcoin is like the valuable asset we all know, but there is value outside of Bitcoin as well, which are called, for lack of a better term, real world assets. Basically, there is equity in company. I like the equity in my company. I might like gold. I might like something else. Now, these values exist outside of the Bitcoin space. What RGB or some other such protocols are trying to do is, how do we use the already existing this train network this network of sending and receiving and wallets and custodying. How do we use this powerful network for value that also sits outside of Bitcoin? So in theory, you could have gold, you could have equities, bonds, like you said, but we know that stablecoin is a proven story, so it's going to be a big part of the RGB story as well. That's the way I see it. But no one is stopping. Some people have already issued some memes and digital stuff that they play around with it. Like it's completely peer to peer. So RGB, there's nothing to stop from anyone from playing it.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, like the proven like product market fit in this industry. It's like, yeah, you have, of course, like Bitcoin, that is from where everything started. You have stable coins that have been proven to have a product market fit. And then you have all this like casino, shitcoin, meme coin, whatever. Those are the three things that have product market fit. I'm not so interested into shitcoin, meme coins, even if like some people like will do that. I think yes, stable coin on Bitcoin is going to be very powerful, and yeah, real world asset. Yeah, I mean, if they take off, of course, like it's better to have them on Bitcoin rather than other chains. But I think they still need to prove themselves to be something that the market really values. So I think it's a lot of people are talking about it, but we're still not seeing it at a significant scale. So yeah, if they actually become a big thing, of course, like they can leverage RGB as well. But yeah, personally, I'm more excited on the stablecoin use case. Also because it can be great for Bitcoin itself, because stablecoins on Lightning can bring more volume to Lightning, both through payment in USDT, but also through trading, because trading volumes can be massive compared to payment volumes. Once we have volumes on Lightning, it means that like people that are working on Lightning, they start to collect better fees, so to make more money. More money means that can build better products, so better Lightning for everyone, also for the people that only care about Bitcoin. They don't care about stablecoin by themselves. So I think this can be the catalyst for the flywheel to make Lightning truly take off. Then yeah, more fee on Lightning is also you start having the liquidity provider to try to collect yield. So I'm very excited about this, not just for RGB itself, but also for Lightning in general.
Gotcha. Can you talk to us a little bit about the RGB ecosystem? Right now, I understand, obviously, it's not just you guys. There are other wallets and other apps out there. Can you give us just a bit of an overview? What are some of, at least today, as we speak, October 2025, who are some of the big other players or software or parts of the RGB ecosystem, just for people who want to get an overview?
Yeah, well, maybe I can just mention a few of them. I mean, I hope I'm not gonna offend anyone that I will fail to mention. But yeah, Tribe is I think he has the most popular RGB wallet. I mean, it's like they really work to build a very very good RGB wallet for mobile. Then on our side on Bitfinex, we released the Iris wallet, which is also like a mobile wallet, but basically in the background, it's running the same library as Stripe. So the difference between the two is mostly on the front end side. They did a much better work in building a good UX for sure. Then there is Kaleidoscope.
I must add that it was also because of a lot of the heavy lifting was done by you guys. So
yeah. Then Kaleidoscope is working on the DEX. He has this DEX product on top of Lightning. Then yeah, Thunderstack is like a voltage product to help integration with RGB and RGB Lightning. And yeah, Bitmask is also building his RGB wallet, but this is more browser based. Then there are a few other wallets that are more focused on the Asian market. Yeah, for sure, I forgot. LFI is an exchange that integrated RGB. And there are many others also that are in the pipeline of integrating RGB as we speak. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about RGB in comparison with other. Now, I guess the way I'm understanding it is there's, let's say, competition from, let's say, inside the family of Bitcoin world. Like you've got things like Liquid and you've got things like Taproot assets kind of inside of Bitcoin or Bitcoin adjacent world. And then you've got like, shitcoin world where, some of these, whatever, they're doing their own chains, they're doing their own whatever L2s and this and that. Can you just give people an overview, at least how you understand it? How does RGB compare to some of these other ways of doing RWA and assets? Like at least maybe starting, let's say, in the family, or in the Bitcoin family, RGB compared with, let's say, Liquid or Taproot assets. How would you compare?
So I can start off, and Federico, please do add. So you have clearly, very well described the problem statement. Basically, there is the Bitcoin space and other space. So clearly, Bitcoin is the most secure chain and very well anchored and all that. So it trumps, RWAs or stable coins issued on other chains, right? They have network effect, but hopefully not for long. So now we come to the Bitcoin space, and like you said, there is Liquid, there's Taproot assets, there's Spark. There are good solutions, there are decent solutions with different trade-offs. We believe that RGB has a fully matured RGB has way better trade-offs as compared to most of the other chain. Liquid, for example, is more federated than peer-to-peer, right? You do have to trust federation and Liquid itself in terms of how they deploy Liquid and all that. When it comes to Taproot assets, a very close competitor, very similar structure, but they do, as far as I understand, they do need centralized indexers because some of their state is global, and that is why there are some benefits of it. But then there is like the centralization around indexers, where in RGB it's completely peer-to-peer. So there are differences, and from an efficiency point of view, we know that how many number of assets or transfers you want to do, it really doesn't matter. It's just like one hash or a hash of a Merkle root, right? So it is way more efficient, and it is net positive for Bitcoin, and for the user it's quite private and quite sovereign. So that's how I look RGB in comparison to other options available out there.
Yeah. Federico?
Yeah, I agree. In the end, like most of the alternatives, they introduce trade-offs, like either like through federation or like to some other kind of trust trade-off, with state chain, etc. And they can be valid trade-off for some users. Maybe they're the right trade-off, but they don't allow you to fully leverage to use it without introducing extra trust assumption compared to the simple one that you have on Bitcoin. That there is no miners that control all the network. So I think this is very powerful for RGB, that it positions itself you have the spectrum between you want to maximize security or you want to maximize efficiency, and when you're somewhere in between, then it's hard to differentiate yourself from the one right left, like right on the left side or on the right side on the spectrum. So it's also harder to on the social scalability side to get some good network effect, and so long term to convince the users to stick around long term. So RGB put itself to the maximizing security, no extra trust assumption compared to Bitcoin. If you're good with the Bitcoin trust assumption, RGB doesn't add anything else. The one that is closer to it is for sure a Taproot asset, because the design is very, very similar. But still, I would say RGB has a few advantages in terms of privacy and in terms of ability to do batching. So there's a few advantages here and there. And then, of course, there are implementation differences. So people may prefer the one implementation compared to the other. But the trade-off there is more similar. So the difference is more on the implementation and distribution side.
And just while we're here, before we move on to the other comparisons, this episode is brought to you by CoinKite, the makers of my favorite Bitcoin hardware wallet, the Cold Card Q. Now, some people think self-custody is too hard, but it's really about taking responsibility for your Bitcoin wealth and understanding that self-custody gives you a true feeling of liberty. The Cold Card Q has a full keyboard and big screen. It's got 2 secure elements and a true air gap, allowing you to go fully air-gapped using QR codes from seed generation to transaction signing. You can power the device using 3 AAA batteries, so you don't even have to plug it into the wall for power. You can easily use it with Sparrow Wallet for PC or Nunchuck on mobile, and you can dial it into the right level of security and complexity that you choose. If you want a simple setup, just use 12 words and single signature. If you want passphrases, easy. If you want to add multi-sig or co-signing features, you've got those too. So go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get 10% off on your Cold Card or other devices and level up your self-custody today. I mean, you guys tell me if I'm missing something or how you see it, but as an example, in the Taproot assets concept, the idea is they're leveraging the already existing Lightning network, and then they may have some kind of Lightning swap provider who's like a special swap provider at the end who's helping do a swap function for the user. But the idea is the end user just sees a Lightning invoice and he just pays a Lightning invoice, and then actually at the end of the day, the merchant gets paid. Let's say that merchant wants to receive Taproot assets Tether as an example, right? That's an example of that gets facilitated that way. If I think about that in like a liquid context, that might be like, bolts.exchange is providing the swap in the background so that the end user can so maybe the end user who's paying, he can pay with Lightning or something else, and then the merchant can receive what he wants. Maybe he wants liquid Tether or whatever, liquid Bitcoin, and he can later swap that into Tether if he wants. So how would that work in an RGB context? Do you see that like there will be like RGB payment processors or like something similar to a bolts.exchange who helps facilitate that? Is that a Kaleidoswap thing? Like maybe just walk me through that just so I understand if you're a merchant who wants to use RGB Tether, what does it look like?
Oh, yes, so like those are differences that are not related to the protocol itself, but more how like the first implementation they decided to work on it. So I had a few discussions also with the Lightning Labs team regarding this. I don't think the model that they propose, which is like not a constraint of the protocol, it's just the way they decided to implement it, it can work that well at scale, because if the fact that you need to like swap twice on the fly for every payment to leverage Bitcoin liquidity instead of bootstrapping like the asset specific liquidity, it sounds good in theory, but in practice it means that every time you do a payment, you need to negotiate 2 swaps, so 2 exchange rate with 2 providers in different parts of the network. You need to pay twice the spread, and this has a lot of latency, a lot of risk of failure of the payments, and potentially a lot of cost. So I think it's a better model to have channels denominated in that asset, because then you don't add all of this complexity and all of this extra cost. Of course, it's a bit more painful because you need to bootstrap liquidity in this asset, but in general, like Lightning is gonna work well for popular assets. If an asset is not popular enough to bootstrap channel liquidity, probably also the exchange rate of the swap provider is not gonna be the best. So it's also not gonna be a great experience anyway. So, I mean, these are not things related to the protocol. I mean, both RGB and Taproot asset can work with both models. So it's more related to the implementation.
Yeah.
I think the way they decided to approach it, I don't feel is the best, but yeah, maybe I will be proven wrong.
Yeah, Anant, anything to add on your side there?
No, I think that's really the implementation difference. Here it's asset specific, asset focused. So yes, you need liquidity of that particular asset, but we have seen that there are assets which have huge network effects, and you really don't have to switch it around. And we've also seen that changing the asset twice, even if let's say I want to send USDT, you want to receive USDT, you will still have 2 swaps. That's like almost unnecessary, right? So for most of the people who are going to probably, let's say 70%, I'm being conservative, but 70% of people would just probably trade in USDT. The swaps are completely unnecessary, right?
I see. So then maybe they end up paying extra swap fees, and maybe it's less efficient that way. I mean, who knows, right? I'm speculating. I don't know.
It's costly. It's interesting to see. It's costlier. It is less efficient, and it will fail more often. You might not find a swap partner. You might not have the right, swap connection at the right time. So I completely feel that asset specific liquidity is a harder initial problem, but once it is there, then like There is no other
I
moving.
see.
There
So
is
you
there
see
is
it more
very
like
less moving
it's harder to
parts.
get that snowball rolling down the hill, or the flywheel example, but once it's rolling, then it's a bit easier to like kind of keep that asset network growing and
Absolutely,
using it.
absolutely.
And I guess you are also
And
leveraged.
how
Obviously, Tether is the world's biggest stablecoin with a lot of like hundreds of millions of users. So I guess you're trying to tap into that market of hundreds of millions of users who might want to do it this way, maybe.
just USDT, yeah. So see, one
Yeah.
of the sorry, just last thing I wanted to complete is, see, one of the things is that asset issuers want their assets to succeed. So they would like to provide the infrastructure and liquidity of that particular asset. And they would like, bootstrap that piece. Now, once that is bootstrapped, so basically the friction is more on the issuer side than the user side. That's one way to look at it, right?
I see. Yeah. Federico, anything you wanted to add there?
Well, assets that are not that popular, yeah, like I think we will end up with the issuer like being like this app node that everyone connects to, and they can go do routing through that. Assets that are more popular like USDT, they will have a more healthy, more distributed network. I mean, potentially USDT, like I think there are more people doing payment with USDT than with Bitcoin right now. I mean, I hope it will change in the future, but this is the situation right now. So potentially we may even end up that for a period of time, we have a Lightning network that is bigger on USDT than it is on Bitcoin. So yeah, why trying to leverage Bitcoin liquidity when you can create a new liquidity?
Gotcha. Okay, so we've spoken a bit about RGB compared, in the family of Bitcoin, let's say. Now, if we compare RGB with kind of shitcoin land, right, like Ethereum, Solana, and Tron, because that's what a lot of people are using nowadays for stablecoin transfers or for some other forms of RWA. How does RGB compare with those?
Yeah, it's like how Bitcoin compares to those. So you have all the differences that you have between Bitcoin and those other layer ones: security, decentralization, reliability of the network, long-term sustainability. You have all of these reasons why Bitcoin is a better layer one to build on rather than these others. And then, yeah, I would like the other thing that we already mentioned is that with RGB, you have native Bitcoin, you have the real Bitcoin that you can swap with, work with. With the others, you need to deal with this centralized Bitcoin. So I think that's like a very appealing reason to use RGB rather than these others. Plus, you don't need to deal with their like native token. Plus, you can leverage the Lightning network that can perform better than some of these layer ones in some cases.
So I'm reading it there as mainly not having to wrap, right? So as an example, WBTC, which is like I think Justin Sun and BitGo and stuff like that, that's basically a wrapped form of Bitcoin that exists on I think Ethereum and maybe Tron or I don't know, whatever. But the point is people are wrapping their Bitcoin to use it on some of these shitcoin layers. Whereas in RGB world, it's just like you're just already using Bitcoin. So you don't need to kind of wrap it. So I guess that's the interesting comparison there. Now, one other angle, and this could be a line of criticism that I've seen amongst some, let's say, more developer and technical types in the Bitcoin world. Their criticism has been, but what if other large assets come to live, quote unquote, on Bitcoin, right? Whether that's RGB or Taproot assets or something else. And could that mean the asset issuer could come to influence Bitcoin soft forks and Bitcoin contentious changes? I guess theoretically the idea would be, okay, what if the government goes to Tether and says, hey, Mr. Tether, you need to go with our chosen fork, this kind of thing. Do you see that as a risk, or is it just like a matter of how big the asset gets, or, Bitcoin remains decentralized anyway? Do you see that as a risk or no? What do you think?
So actually this segues very well from the previous point you mentioned. And one of the things we touched on the previous point is that there is some kind of a smart contract that has been put on the chain to be able to deal with it. In RGB, there is no smart contract on chain. So there's no management of smart contract. Obviously, you rely on the issuer, but other than the issuer, you don't have to rely on the credibility or the continuity of the smart contract being there. So obviously the trust assumptions are very clear. You trust the issuer, yes, that's it. That's the only trust you have, and everything is peer to peer. I send it to you, I trust you, you have to trust me. So if you carry that line of thinking forward into this question, where it is about what if there's a big asset that is used on RGB, does it impact the forking or reorganization or rollbacks of Bitcoin? I think theoretically it is possible, but number one, the asset will have to be super big, right, to really incentivize the miners to roll back the whole thing, to roll back blocks. They can't just choose a particular transaction and take it out, because they do not have the private keys. They can't do anything about it. While in case of smart contracts, they might do something with the smart contracts, right? The other thing is, in case of RGB, when you see a transaction, you cannot make out on the Bitcoin blockchain that this is an RGB transaction. It has an asset, so it will which transaction are you going to roll back? Which block are you going to roll back? And what are you going to do? So it will need way more coordination. You will have to actually, collude with the sender, figure out which one it is, then put in enough money to roll it back, and then still make sure that someone else doesn't go forward to it. So unless it's like probably a multi-million-dollar asset on a single transaction, there is absolutely no incentive. Theoretically, it's possible, but there will be very less incentive for that. And yeah, that's how I'll put it.
I think there are like two angles to this. One is the incentive for let's say you have this massive USDT transactions, and then there is an incentive for the miners maybe to roll back some transaction if there is enough bribing from the other side. But that is the same problem that you have already with big Bitcoin transaction. If I make a Bitcoin transaction that is moving $1 million of Bitcoin, it's already many multiples of the mining rewards. So there is already a big incentive for bribing the market, the miner, to try to reorder the chain. So it doesn't really introduce a new vector of attack, a new vulnerability. It's already the same dynamic that you're also already with Bitcoin transaction. Bitcoin transaction can already have multiple down the value of the miner reward. So yeah, that's some dynamic that is already a stake that is solved by waiting for more confirmations. So I don't think it changed anything there. While on the idea that the government, USDT is very popular on Bitcoin, everyone is using it, and the government goes to Tether and say, okay, now you need to use my KYC fork of Bitcoin, and Tether agrees. Okay, so what? Okay, Tether will move to the KYC fork of Bitcoin. Bitcoiners keep using the Bitcoin blockchain. Which one is bigger? Who cares? I mean, the important thing is that Bitcoin, as it is intended to work, keeps being able to serve the user. So then if there is another KYC fork of Bitcoin that is used for USDT, who cares? I mean, it's there. You don't need to use it if you only care about Bitcoin. So.
Yeah. Okay. And so, did you have a final comment there, Anant?
No. I'm saying that's a very good way to put it, Federico, because what we are saying is that there is no additional trust or additional attack vector that RGB is introducing into Bitcoin, and that's actually very, very important to underscore. So everything that RGB is doing is trying to keep it completely off-chain. No additional trust requirements, no additional attack vectors it introduces either to Bitcoin or users. That's essentially why RGB is much more powerful, and kind of, it doesn't really impact Bitcoin. It is only net positive for Bitcoin, if anything.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you guys on that, on the decentralization side of things. Maybe the challenge then is just how do you get users, right? Like just getting product market fit, right? So where do you guys see that coming from? Because it might be a case where, RGB is more secure and more decentralized, but users maybe don't care. So what's going to make users care and make users decide, I want to use RGB Tether or RGB Tribe, RGB to do operations, whether that's RWA or stablecoin stuff. What do you guys think?
To be honest, users wouldn't care. Users wouldn't come to a solution, or they wouldn't come to Tribe because it's RGB. To be honest, they would want a faster, more reliable, and cheaper, more effective solution. So no one comes for, because it is this particular technology, I'm going to use it, right? They come for what they are getting out of it. And that is what, people in the product team like ours are trying to solve. without telling, okay, use us because we are good and we are Bitcoin and we are RGB. That is why you use us. Maybe 10 people will use you. Only like people who want to try it out. But when you want really, mass adoption, then that you have to provide real value. So RGB, we have established here on this call that RGB does have real value in terms of security, in terms of efficiency, everything. Now it is our job of how those benefits of RGB get translated to the benefits that the user gets without user having to worry about if it is RGB. It should be cheaper, it should be faster, it should always be available, right? If we can crack these three, which RGB kind of promises, we need to translate it and get to the users. And that is what essentially we are working on. When they find a solution where they see, initially probably USDT might have was on Omni, but it was very difficult. It did move on, and then it did move on. So if we are able to provide a way better solution and there's a lot of community support for it, then we believe that adoption should come with it.
I think as Anant say, the adoption doesn't come from the technology, but comes from good products being built. So the builders are gonna create adoption, not like the protocol being amazing and being good tech. But I think so the question is, how can RGB attract builders? I think there are all these benefits of the tech that we just discussed, but there's also the fact that people don't like to bring their users to someone else's playground. And all other layers ones are always, or other solution that introduce trust trade-off, they're always someone else's playground, because there is someone that bootstrapped that layer one that created the chain that is benefiting from the token going up, the layer one token going up, or that is as controlling the chain. So RGB position itself as this neutral playground where you can go there. You are just under Bitcoin rules. You are not under someone else's rules. And so it rewards on the social scalability side. So you don't need to introduce trust or having a good business relationship to the party that is managing that other chain or that other solution. So I think this is something that can attract big use case, big liquidity, and then in the end, big good builders. And in the end, it can create the network effect to have good adoption for and good experience for all the users.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's interesting just to see the competition and kind of what are the unique things about RGB. So as I'm reading it, as I'm understanding it, it's like this idea. Okay, so again, the client side validated paradigm. It's a different paradigm, but that allows certain things in terms of maybe low fees, easiness of use, and that may attract, like you said, Federico, certain builders to the ecosystem, who build certain products, and then obviously those products are what hopefully appeals to the end users who want to actually use the wallets and the swaps services and the decentralized exchanges and so on. So I guess we'll leave it there. Any last comment, and where can people find you online and learn more about either what you're building or just RGB in general?
People can find me on Twitter, just my name, Federico Tenga, so it's very easy to find me. And to learn more about RGB, there is we have this website that a lot of people are contributing to maintain. It's called RGB Info, where you have you can find access to all the information, both educational but also developers tools and various resources. So I recommend people to go to rgb.info to learn more about RGB.
So you can definitely find me on X, Anant_Tap. But more importantly, I would request you to download Bitcoin Tribe. Just search Bitcoin Tribe in your app stores, or follow Bitcoin Tribe on X, and use it. See the power of RGB. Give us feedback, and that's how you can get involved and get in touch.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Federico and Anant, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Stephan.